My name's Tyler. I work maintenance for a chain of boutique hotels scattered around upstate New York. It's not glamorous, but it's steady work. My life's pretty simple. Drive, fix what's broken, drive some more. Last fall, I got assigned to one of our smaller hotels, a rustic, renovated Victorian house turned into a 7-room inn. The kind of place with floral wallpaper, old chandeliers, and creaky floors that groan under your steps. It was just me, the night receptionist, and a security guy who mostly sat in his car watching Netflix. Usually, I didn't mind. Quiet nights, quick jobs, in and out. Anyway, one Thursday, I was told to stay overnight to supervise some light construction they had going on the 3rd floor. A busted water pipe had damaged part of the guest hallway, and the manager didn't want to leave it unattended overnight. They put me in one of the empty guest rooms for the night. Room 6, 2nd floor, end of the hall, facing the back of the property. I remember thinking how cold it felt compared to the rest of the inn. The heater was on, but the air had this damp, stale heaviness, almost like the room hadn't been opened in months. Whatever. I tossed my bag on the chair, set my phone to charge, and stretched out on the big old-fashioned bed. The first few hours were boring in the best way possible. I scrolled through my phone, dozed off, woke up, checked the hallway when I heard some hammering upstairs. The construction crew was still wrapping up. Around 2 a.m., things finally settled down. The crew cleared out, and it was just me and the receptionist downstairs. I brushed my teeth in the little bathroom attached to room 6, flipped off the main light, and climbed into bed. The moonlight slipping through the thin curtains barely lit the room. It wasn't pitch black, but dim enough that my brain started seeing shapes in the dark. You know how it is when you're half asleep. I rolled over, pulling the blanket up around my shoulders. That's when I first heard it. Thud. It wasn't loud, more like something soft but heavy dropping onto the floor just outside the room. I froze, ears straining. Then nothing. I told myself it was the building settling. Old houses like this creak and groan all the time. I turned over and closed my eyes again, but a few minutes later, another sound, a dragging noise. Long, slow, right outside the door. My stomach tightened. It didn't make sense. There was no reason anyone should be on this floor except me, and the receptionist downstairs would have called if anything was wrong. I sat up, heart hammering. Maybe it was the night guard making rounds. But I hadn't heard the front door open, and the main stairwell was old. It always squeaked loudly when someone used it. I slid off the bed and tiptoed to the door, putting my ear against it. Silence. I stood there for a full minute, every muscle in my body tensed. Then, knock. A single, hard knock. I jerked back from the door, breath caught in my throat. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. Too slow, too heavy to be a guest fumbling around drunk. I didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there, waiting. Another knock. Softer this time, then, a faint sound that made my skin crawl. Breathing. Right on the other side of the door. I backed away, heart jackhammering, trying to reason it out. Maybe the security guard was messing around. Maybe he thought it was funny. But no one should have been on this floor. And if it was a prank, why the weird dragging sound? I grabbed the old brass key off the nightstand, fumbling to double-check the lock. It was already locked. I didn't know what else to do, so I just sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the key like an idiot. Minutes dragged by. Eventually the breathing stopped, nothing but silence. I stayed awake, listening. At some point I must have drifted off without realizing it. When I opened my eyes, the room was lighter, that eerie pale blue of early dawn. For a second, I felt stupid about the whole thing. I chalked it up to a bad dream and stood to stretch. That's when I noticed it. The door to the room, the heavy oak door I'd locked and double-checked, was ajar. Open just a crack. My mouth went dry. No way I would have missed that. I inched toward it, pushing it open slowly. The hallway beyond was empty, silent. The same faint smell of dampness and wood polish hung in the air. I stepped out and looked left down the hall. Nothing. Right down the hall. Nothing. But when I glanced at the floor, my stomach twisted. Drag marks, long, uneven marks in the dust on the hallway floor, like something or someone had been pulled along. They started right outside my door and trailed down the hall, disappearing into room 8. Now, room 8 was supposed to be under renovation. No guests, no furniture, no nothing. I knew because I helped move the furniture myself earlier that week. Against every screaming instinct in my body, I found myself walking down the hall following the marks. I stopped outside room 8. The door was half open. The inside was dark, darker than the hall. The only light came from the faint glow leaking through the grimy window. I listened. Nothing. I reached out and pushed the door open fully. Inside, the room was empty. Empty except for a battered old armchair sitting in the far corner. And in the middle of the floor, a puddle of water, fresh, still rippling like it had just been disturbed. The smell hit me then, wet fabric, rot, and something else, something faintly sweet and rancid at the same time. I don't know why, but I stepped inside. The air felt colder than it had any right to be. I crossed the room slowly, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I reached the puddle and crouched down, touched the floor with my fingertips. It wasn't just water, it was slimy. I stood up fast, wiping my hand on my jeans, feeling the prickly burn of adrenaline creeping up my spine. That's when I noticed the chair. There was something in it, something that hadn't been there before. At first I thought it was just a trick of the shadows, but when my eyes adjusted, I could see it clear as day. A figure, small, child-sized, hunched over, its head twisted at an unnatural angle, staring straight at me with wide, dark eyes. I didn't wait. I bolted out of that room, not looking back. I sprinted down the stairs, nearly tripping over my own feet, and crashed through the lobby door. The receptionist looked up, startled. I must have looked like a lunatic, sweaty, pale, shaking. I couldn't even explain what happened. Just muttered something about feeling sick and needing to leave. I packed up my stuff in less than 2 minutes and peeled out of the parking lot. I didn't sleep that day. Or the next. When I finally worked up the courage to call the manager and explain why I wasn't coming back to that property, he sounded weirdly unsurprised. He just said, "Yeah, room 8's always been a problem." That's all he said. No explanation, no details. Just that. It's been months now, and I still have nightmares about that chair. Sometimes I wake up swearing I hear the same dragging noise outside my bedroom door. I keep telling myself it was just the stress, the lack of sleep, the creepy old house playing tricks on me. But then I remember the way those dark eyes looked right through me, and I wonder if maybe, just maybe, I didn't leave whatever it was behind. Maybe it followed me home. I work from home. I'm a freelance copywriter, so my office setup is pretty important. When I bought this house, the office was actually one of the main selling points. A small extra bedroom upstairs with these big windows that overlook the backyard. The room felt perfect, cozy, private. I don't know how else to explain it except to say that it just fit. At first. The house itself is nothing special. 1950s build, suburban neighborhood, close enough to the city but still quiet. It needed a little work when I moved in, but I liked the idea of fixing things up myself. Fresh paint, new floors, minor repairs, the usual. For the first couple of weeks, I didn't notice anything unusual. I settled into a routine pretty quickly. Wake up around 7:30, coffee, emails, work from about 8:30 to 4. Give or take. The office was comfortable. I even joked to friends that it felt like the house wanted me there. But then little things started happening. At first it was just atmosphere. The office would always feel a little colder than the rest of the house, even when the heat was blasting. I figured it was poor insulation or something, old house problems, no big deal. But then came the sounds. I'd hear creaks overhead, like someone stepping around in the attic above my office. Only there's no attic up there, just roof. It's not even a crawl space, just beams and shingles. I told myself it was maybe squirrels or birds nesting. Again, old house, right? Still, something about it felt different. Sometimes I'd leave a coffee mug or a pen on my desk, walk out to grab lunch, and when I came back, they'd be on the floor, not knocked over, placed there, almost deliberately. I even tried convincing myself that maybe I had knocked things over without realizing, that I was just distracted. Too much caffeine, too much screen time. I didn't want to be one of those people, the ones who move into an old house and immediately start talking about ghosts. But I couldn't ignore it forever. One afternoon, about a month in, I was on a Zoom call when it happened. I was mid-sentence when the door behind me, my office door, just slammed shut, hard, loud enough that it made my webcam shake. I jumped and immediately started apologizing to the client on the other end, laughing it off like, "Oh, sorry, drafty house." But inside, my heart was hammering. There wasn't any draft. All the windows were closed. The air wasn't even running. I was alone in the house. After the call ended, I sat there staring at the door for a while. I finally got up, opened it slowly, checked the hallway. Nothing. Silence. For a few days after that, the office just felt off, like walking into a room that someone else had just left. That weird sense of presence. The hairs on the back of my neck would stand up for no reason. Sometimes I thought I heard whispering, so soft it was almost more like a vibration in my ears than actual sound. I tried working downstairs for a bit, set up my laptop at the kitchen table, but every time I did, something would happen upstairs. Once it was the sound of the office chair rolling across the floor. Another time, it was the unmistakable tap, tap, tap of a pencil against the desk, like someone impatient. It felt angry, territorial, like whatever was up there didn't want me moving my workspace. One night, after a few beers and feeling a little braver than usual, I decided to test it. I went up there, laptop under one arm, and said out loud, "Hey, this is my house now. I need this space." Immediately, the overhead light flickered and buzzed so loudly it actually made me wince. I turned it off and back on. It stopped. But when I sat down at the desk, my office chair felt wrong. The seat was warm, like someone had just gotten up. I didn't last long that night. I grabbed my laptop and went back downstairs. The next day, I started looking into the history of the house. Public records, local forums, anything I could find. It turns out the previous owner was an older man who had passed away here. Natural causes. No big mystery. But he had been a writer too. An old-school typewriter guy. According to some old neighborhood chatter, that little upstairs room had been his office for decades. Apparently, he barely left it. His kids even joked at his funeral that he lived and died in that damn room. I tried not to let it get in my head. I wasn't superstitious. I wasn't scared of some old ghost who liked his office. Hell, maybe if anything, we could share the space. But it didn't work like that. Over the next few weeks, the incidents got worse, more aggressive. One afternoon, every framed photo on my desk got knocked over at once. It wasn't like they fell in a chain reaction. They fell opposite directions, like someone had just swung their arms across the desk in a rage. Sometimes I'd find my computer powered off in the middle of the night, even though I know I left it on for updates. Once I found a sticky note stuck to the monitor that just said, "Leave." I don't even keep sticky notes in that room. That was the last straw. I moved my office downstairs permanently, turned the upstairs room into a storage space, sealed it off. I don't even go in there anymore unless I absolutely have to. And the weird part? Ever since I stopped using it, the house feels normal again, like whatever was up there finally calmed down, like we made some kind of unspoken deal. You stay up there, I stay down here. We don't bother each other. I still think about it sometimes. Wonder if I should try clearing the space or getting it blessed or whatever people do. But honestly, I don't want to poke the bear. Every now and then, when the house is really quiet late at night, I still hear it. The faint creak of a chair rolling across the old hardwood floor upstairs, like someone settling in for a long night of work. I don't go check anymore. I don't want to know. I spent last summer living with my grandma. She's always been this strong, stubborn woman. Lived alone for years after my grandpa passed, managed the house all by herself. But lately, the family had started worrying about her memory slipping. Nothing major, just little things. Misplacing keys, confusing names, stuff you expect from someone in their late 70s. So when my mom asked if I'd be willing to stay with her for a while, I said yes. No hesitation. I was on break from college anyway, plus it felt good to do something useful for once. Grandma lives in this small house at the edge of town, tucked into one of those neighborhoods where every driveway has cracks and all the trees lean a little too far over the road. The kind of place that feels untouched by time, and not always in a good way. The first couple of days were uneventful. We played cards, watched old TV shows, went through boxes of old family photos she insisted on digging out. She was sharp, mostly, slower than I remembered, but still herself. At first. I think it was the third or fourth night when I first heard her talking to someone. It was around 2 a.m. I had gotten up for water and paused at the top of the stairs when I heard her voice. Soft, cheerful, like she was chatting with a guest. At first, I thought maybe she was on the phone, but when I peeked around the corner, she was sitting alone in the living room, talking to an empty chair across from her. I stood there frozen for a second, watching her nod and smile at nothing. It creeped me out, but I told myself it was probably just dreams. Sleep talking, confusion, something harmless. The next morning, over breakfast, she mentioned him casually, like he was the most normal thing in the world. "My friend," she said, buttering her toast with shaking hands. "He keeps me company when it gets lonely." I asked who she meant. She smiled, this sweet, distant smile. "The young man who visits. He's very polite." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I wanted to believe it was just her mind playing tricks on her. I wanted to believe it was harmless, but then things started happening. Objects would move. I'd leave my phone charging on the kitchen counter, come back an hour later, and it'd be sitting by the sink. The TV would turn itself on in the middle of the night, always to some old black and white station that I didn't even know she had. Once I found a chair pulled out from the dining room table. Just one chair, angled like someone had been sitting there waiting. Every time I mentioned something, Grandma would just smile and say, "Oh, that's just him," like it explained everything. One evening, I was in the guest room scrolling on my laptop when the smell hit me. Cigarette smoke, strong, fresh, like someone had just lit one up in the hallway. I froze. Grandma didn't smoke. Nobody in our family did. I stood up, opened the door, and peered down the hallway. Nothing. Just the dark outline of the living room. Still, the smell lingered. I even checked outside thinking maybe a neighbor was smoking near a window, but the air outside was clean. When I asked Grandma about it the next morning, she laughed like I was being silly. "He smokes sometimes," she said lightly, sipping her tea. "He tries to be polite about it, though, never around me." That day I called my mom, told her everything. She chalked it up to dementia. "Maybe hallucinations," she said. "It's common. Just keep an eye on her." I didn't tell her about the smoke, or the moving objects, or the way, sometimes at night, I'd swear I heard footsteps on the carpeted stairs, slow and deliberate. I didn't tell her because part of me didn't want to believe it either. Then there was the night I woke up freezing. I checked the thermostat. It was still set to 70, but my room felt like a walk-in freezer. My breath misted in the air when I exhaled. And there, standing at the foot of the bed, was a figure, tall, thin, dressed in something dark and old-fashioned. At first I thought it was my eyes playing tricks. I blinked hard, rubbed my face, looked again. He was still there, not moving, just watching. I don't know how long I stayed like that, frozen, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Finally, I squeezed my eyes shut and counted to 10 like a little kid. When I opened them, he was gone. The room was still ice cold, though. I barely slept after that. The next morning, Grandma seemed different, tired, drained, like she hadn't slept either. She kept looking toward the living room, this nervous little twitch in her eyes. And when I asked if she was okay, she just said, "Sometimes he gets upset when people don't believe he's real." That shook me. I told her maybe it was time to have someone come stay with her full time, that maybe it wasn't safe for her to be alone anymore. She smiled again, that same faraway smile. "I'm not alone." That was my last night there. I packed my things quietly while Grandma napped in her chair. As I zipped up my bag, I heard something fall upstairs. A heavy thud, like a body collapsing. I bolted up the stairs two at a time, my heart racing, only to find nothing out of place. But the smell of cigarette smoke was overwhelming. It clung to the walls, thick and stale. I left that afternoon, promising Grandma I'd come back soon, even though I knew I wouldn't. Mom ended up hiring a full-time nurse a few months later. Grandma still talks about her friend sometimes, tells the nurse not to sit in his chair, leaves an extra plate out at dinner. The nurse says she hears things too. Doors opening, footsteps at night, whispers that sound almost like breathing. Grandma seems happy though, and honestly, that's the weirdest part of all.